whole journey into the Generations Project started some years ago when we found many churches coming to us in Graceworks to ask for help because they were losing their young people, millennials or younger. And obviously this was something that was noticeable. People were worried. They came and asked, myself, how can we help churches to understand and keep their young? And so we tried our best, and we responded. But after a while, we realized that there was something more going on. Why were the young people leaving the church? And one of the reasons, of course, was a very different culture of those who are very young and those who are older. There's a cultural difference that causes misunderstanding and tensions. So it's not enough just to help the old understand the young. If something more is happening, we needed to understand all the generations and help the generations understand each other. So we moved from just how to help the churches stop bleeding their young adults to, hey, how can we understand each other better? Old and young, all the different generations. So our tagline at the time was unity through empathy. How can we really be united if I don't really know you? I think love is based on knowledge. I must know you, what makes you tick, what are your joys and struggles. That gives me the ability to love you. Otherwise, it's a very abstract concept. You cannot love someone unless you know something about them. So unity through empathy. How can we be united as God wants us to be? 1 Corinthians 12, you are one church. There's only one God. But for that to happen, of course, the different people in the church need to understand each other. It's a very basic thing. And especially in a very busy society, because understanding and love means investment of time and attention. But the one thing that really struck us in the end was that there was no real serious Asian study. Everybody will quote Barner to us, Barner said, which is great, and we are grateful for the work that they have done and they have pioneered. But I think every society has its own unique cultural distinctives. So in Singapore, we're very influenced by the West, but there's still a lot of influence of Confucian values, and we have our own mix. So that's why we embark on this, to not just understand the different generations, but the different generations in Singapore. And we'll share later about the very committed on-the-ground research. It's not just somebody drinking coffee somewhere and thinking what it should happen, but rather it's a lot of on-the-ground research where we actually ask and listen to people from different generations. It's very easy to have a cup of coffee and then what should be, but actually he especially did a lot of interfacing. Some of you were interviewed by him to hear really what you guys felt. Well, I guess the problem comes because we live in a unique point in history, and there are this so-called 5, and now increasing 5 generations. The silent generations, and this is just one way of dividing this, are born between 28 and 45. And they often call the silent generation because they didn't talk too much. They just did what needed to be done. Often that was actually survival. World War II, economic downturn, my parents' generation. You hear their stories, it was a very hard time. So silent actually is a mark of respect that they didn't talk too much, but they actually did what was needed to survive. That's why we are here, because they survived. Then after the war was over, then they got more time to make babies. So you got the boomer generation. Suddenly there's a boom, there's a lot of people got born because those babies were created, made after the war, when there's more time, more good feelings to make babies. So there's this huge generation. It was the largest demographic for a long time, and recently overtaken by the millennials. But this is boomer generation. And they grew in a time of relative peace, but their values are very shaped by their parents. Because their parents, for example, like my father almost died in the war. He was buried in an air raid. So that generation is concerned for safety, for security, for stability. We don't simply go and experiment or what, no? And earn your living first, be stable first before you go and do anything. What? A year got no faith. I said, please, let's cut them some slack. You have no idea what they went through. You have no idea what they went through. And then my generation didn't go through that, but those are the values I inherited because they want to make sure their children don't suffer. So we echo a lot of the values from our parents, silent. So boomer, silent, quite the same. Gen X is this rather quiet generation. In some sense, they are squeezed between two very loud generations. The boomer, and the millennial, now the largest. The Gen X are quite get squeezed between each other. But actually, our studies have shown that all other things being equal, Gen X may make very good leaders in this day and age because they can build bridges up and down. They can connect with those who are older, boomers, and they're younger. The millennials and those who are more tech savvy. They are actually a good place. I think some institutions and churches that have trusted Gen Xers to lead actually are doing fairly well. I mean, of course, other things being equal. Then the millennials will be the first who really grew up in the time of internet, and the two defining things will be globalization. They see the world as one huge reality, not just Ang Mo Kio. They see the whole world. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to single out Ang Mo Kio. And the internet and globalization. For those in the boomer or silent, well, to take a train to Penang, big thing. Here, let's fly here and there. So, again, I'm saying all these things that no generation is right or wrong or whatever. I'm just pointing out the formative experiences and why we are different when we encounter each other. And then Gen Z or Z, if you are more English, British, would be those who have lived their whole life on the phone. That is their world. Not even internet. I mean, not even computers, the phone. For better or for worse, their life on the phone. So these are all very different generations, and their culture are shaped by different formative experiences. Now, I want to say up front that I'm not saying that this is a way to stereotype people. Because there are some boomers who act like Gen X. There are some Gen X who act like boomers. So whenever I meet someone, I always want to listen and get to know that individual. I say, oh, you're a boomer, means you're like that. I think that's not what this study is about. In ministry, we treat each one as an individual. But we're talking about trends, broad trends that affect different generations. To understand this so that we can be empathetic, unity to empathy. And so that's why we have done this. In an attempt that this can be helped, that God will use this to help our churches be more united, and young and old can contribute their unique strengths together. That's our hope. It's not just a sociological thing or what. It's our hope that as we share the gospel, as we live as the body of Christ, how can understanding our cultural difference because of age groups help us do that better? So just out of, now I'm very capo. How many here are silent? Silent generation. Okay, one. This is 28 to 45. How many here boomer? Join me, brothers and sisters. Oh, not that many. Okay. How many Gen X? All right. Leaders. Millennials. Okay, you're happy, I'm happy. Gen Z. A few. So just capo and just kidding. But let me move on to some definitions and then I'll pass the time to Wei Hao. There are many terminology and concepts out there. Some, our own formulation, and all this is expanded in the book, is multi-generational, basically a recognition that your church has many generations. That's all it is. So you have maybe 5 or 4 generations. My church has many generations. And the generations basically are quite siloed. They do their own thing. There's the youth ministry, the seniors ministry, whatever. Everybody do their own thing, and there's minimal interaction between them. And I find that this actually is a very pragmatic way of doing things. All the youth go there, seniors go there. They all have similar needs, so we just put them in different groups. But trouble is that they cannot qualify to the other group. So the youth guy, it's time for you to move to the other group. You go there, oh, culture different. They go back to the youth again until they are 50 years old. They're still in the youth. Or whatever. So because the culture is so different. And so there's multi-gen, everybody do their own thing, very silo. And we are not against age-specific ministries. Of course, different age groups have different unique needs. We are not against that. But is that all there is? Second is cross-generational, meaning there's some kind of interaction between the generations. Because in the church, some events, no choice, like Christmas service, church camp, all the gens have to come and work together to some degree. So what does uncle want? What do the young people want? So there's some connection, but the point being that the people are not transformed by their encounter. They just have to functionally work together. That's cross-generational. Intergen, which is the holy grail that we are aiming for, it's where the different generations actually work together and are transformed by their encounter. I work with someone who is younger, and I'm younger, and I'm transformed by that encounter. And hopefully, and they are transformed, they're accountable with me as well. So there's mutual growth because different generations have different strengths. And when we aim towards intergen, which the book will tell you is not easy, but we take step by step. And I can testify to this. I have the privilege of working. Wei Hao and I are living example of this. He's a millennial, boomer. And I think if you're both committed to Christ and you love each other, can happen one lah. But not automatically, we need to have some degree of understanding of what's happening. So this is the journey we are on. And we feel very humbled by this project that we've been asked to do. But I think you are here because I think you understand somewhat of the importance. We can't run away from this reality, you see, in all our churches, our groups, 4 or 5 generations. How are we going to understand each other so we can love each other and serve together instead of having conflict, then one group leave? No? Many seniors now, I'm not needed anymore. I don't know TikTok, so I don't know. I'm useless, I'm too old. Or whatever. So I tell you, I hear stories from old and young who feel they no longer fit. And that shouldn't be the case, ma. Young and old, we should all belong. Whether young adults who feel the elders don't get them, or elders who feel that they are now beyond their time, they're useless already. This is not from the kingdom of God. No, no, no. So the Generations Project is an attempt, and we are by no means the final word. That's why we need all of you to give feedback and to help us to go another step in understanding each other in the different generations so we can love each other and contribute our strengths for God's purposes. All this is very easy to talk. I'm good at talking. But the actual hard work is my friend, Wei Hao. I asked him to come and share his part of the thing.
Hi everyone, my name is Wei Hao. So I'm just bear with me for a couple of minutes as I go through some of how we got into the research and how we got into the insights that we put into the book. So broadly speaking, the research was split into two big arenas. One is the ethnography, which was a lot of qualitative interviews that were done with people from different generations, which were then kind of validated with a quantitative survey. I'll say a little bit more in a while. And the other big portion is what we call generational trends. So these are both global and local happenings which we think through our research have been very profoundly shaped the way different generations think and kind of operate and have their different worldviews. Sorry. Yeah. And in every research like this, which deals with generations, you need to kind of differentiate between what's a generational trend and what's a life stage trend. So an example of a life stage trend is, so incidentally, I don't know where he's seated today, but I have a secondary school classmate who is now a very esteemed pastor in the Methodist circle who is here today. So a life stage trend, when we were secondary school classmates, right? You know, when you're 16, 17, you can probably be having prata with your friend at supper until 2, 3 a.m. And maybe the next day at 8 a.m. you're with the same person playing soccer again, right? So at 16, 17 years old, that's entirely possible. When you're 40 years old, you're married, you have young children at home, very unlikely you're going to be able to do that. Like, if you do that, maybe you won't have a family much longer, right? After you do that. And so that's just an example of a life stage trend, right? We all go through it. Whichever generation you are in, you go through these things as you move on in life. So that's a life stage trend. Generational trends are like what Suyin mentioned, the formative experience that is very particular to one generation that will not be experienced by other generations. For example, the war years that the silent and the boomer generations have to go through, or the Gen Zs especially, they are the first generation which are purely digital natives. I mean, I'm known as a geriatric millennial, so an old millennial, you know. So I still remember a time where there was the internet, right? You know, when your first download came, then you have those strange modems, then after that, then you get. But the Gen Zs don't know of a world that does not have the internet, and they don't know of a world that information is just at their fingertips. Right? So even though all generations will need to grapple with technology, but none of the other generations will have this experience that the Gen Zs have. And so in this research, what we have hoped to present are what we think are the generational trends. Because life stage trends, they will change, right? And that's fine. That's why sometimes you get comments by some older generation in church say, hey, it's okay lah, the millennials are leaving the church, it's fine. When I was that age, I was also very rebellious one. Give them time, when they have children, they will come back to church one. There may be some truth in it, but it may not always be true, simply because the generational trends have become different. Okay, sorry. Back. Sorry, so even millennials also need to struggle with technology. Yeah, okay. So this is just to give you a sense of how we did our ethnographic research, right? So when you do qualitative research in terms of qualitative interviews, it is not as if if you do 100 interviews, you will get 100 times the insights as you would get from one interview. At a certain point, your number of insights starts to plateau, meaning that you will keep hearing repeated answers to the same questions. And the researchers have kind of tagged that to about 20 to 30 interviews. If you choose your topic well, you scope your interviewees well, at around 20 to 30 interviews, you will get about 80 to 90% of the total insights that you would have gotten. And so that was what we tried to do as we did our research, right? We look for what we call data saturation point. That meaning if I interview 20 people, and if 15 of them tell me roughly the same answer to that same question, that for us is a data saturation point. When we hit that saturation point, we will then develop, this is most likely going to be a trend of this particular generation, so we develop a trend, and with the trend, we develop archetypes. So why archetypes? Archetypes are humanized versions of the trends so that we are able to kind of look at these as people. You know, what we don't want to do is when you read this book or when you look at the research and say that, oh, this is the problems that I need to solve from this generation. So that's not what we are hoping to do. What we hope to be able to, the conversation will go is, how can I love this generation better? So when we humanize these trends, when we bring them up in terms of what are personal struggles of generations, we feel that it might work better. And then finally, we use a quantitative survey that was a randomized survey sent online to anyone who was willing to take that survey in that generation to see how representative or how accurate our archetypes as well as our trends are. So this is just a snapshot of how we did our research. Okay, yeah. And finally, these are the final stats that we came up with. So in this project, we did about 131 interviews. These interviews tend to be about 60 minutes to 1.5 hours long. So these interviewees came from 63 churches, unique churches, across 10 denominations, and we had about 1,700 online survey respondents. So this is just to give you a broad idea of how we came to the data. And so so this is what you all came here today to listen to. So I'm going to invite the panelists on stage for the next session. Yeah, so panelists, could I invite you all?
Having our dear friends with us is also acknowledgement that we don't do this alone. We are not some kind of experts, and we are learning in community. So this is very important to us. There's no one single or two talking heads that will dominate everything, because we are on a journey, and it's important that we walk with people. So these are 5 very dear friends, not just colleagues, but friends as well. So I've been asked to introduce the 3 older ones. I wonder why, but okay. So Dr. Ernest Chew, who supposedly represents the silent, is Associate Senior Fellow with ICA's Yusof Ishak Institute. But really, 40 years Faculty of History, University of Singapore. And at some point, also head of the department. And I was thinking, how many of us with that kind of track record of faithful service? But I know him more as a friend and the elder of Bethesda Frankel when I go and minister there. Always the smiling face, the affirmation, the kindness. And I always believe that the best people are the most humble. And so, thank you, sir, for all your encouragement and for being part of this. So let's welcome. Dr. Calvin Chong, you see his data associate prof, practical theology, all that. And so, of course, it's true, he will be teaching Bible, missions, practical ministry on various boards with the Methodist Church, which is the denomination he comes from, and deep interest in worship and music. But for me, the 2 things that strike me about him are his creativity, always pushing the boundaries of life and not just ministry of life, and his deep heart for people on the margins. So it's a very interesting combination. Creative, heart for people on the margins. Thanks, Kelvin, for being with us. And Pastor, I always get confused, Sim Whitley or Whitley Sim? Either one of us again. Sim Whitley. I first knew him as a young adults and youth pastor for Glad Tidings Church. In fact, one of the first local pastors to welcome me when I first came down from KL to Singapore, and he was so warm in his welcome even then. Now, I can't pronounce his new role, but trying acting mobilization-based director. Is that correct? Okay. For Pioneers in Asia, a major ministry, missions ministry, but more someone who has a heart for God and people and has been staying the course in terms of ministry all these years. So he's one of my earliest friends when I came down. So happy to have him here.
So, test. So I'm going to introduce the Millennial and Gen Z. So I just want to make a note here, because in all our collaterals that went out, actually the Millennial representative was supposed to be Estella. So she's a pastor in Church of Singapore, but she became very ill yesterday, so she couldn't make it today. And so Reggie, a good friend of ours, very courageously and in great humility stepped up at the last moment to help us out. So thank you very much, Reggie. Reggie is a youth worker in Singapore Youth for Christ. And when I asked him how he wanted to describe himself, he say in his day job, he helps young people explore the meaning in life, especially with God, right? But off the job, he's also very passionate about digital missions, so he's part of Indigitus and facilitating conversation for change, especially among groups of people with different backgrounds. And so he says that the two core values that he holds most dearly is curiosity and growth. Yep, so this is from Millennial, right? Thank you. Yeah, and finally, for our Gen Z, this is Thelma. So Thelma just graduated, right? Yes, yeah. So she was the former vice chair of Varsity Christian Fellowship in NUS, and she said that through her experience in VCF in NUS, she gained a lot of valuable exposure, to the diversity of different churches, denominations, and how different Christians in different circles work. And when she's not busy with doing ministry, she loves creating art, and she also loves spending time with her cat. Yeah. And so this is Thelma. Thank you again for coming. Yeah. So before that, I'm just gonna say that if you see there is a QR code, right? So as we ask these questions, of course we will love it later on during Q&A if you all could just raise your hands and we pass the mic to you. But if you want to just contribute digitally and ask your questions online, you can also scan this QR code and post your questions. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, your questions and observations will be very critical for tonight as well. So you have a chance to raise your hand, you pass your mic, or if you're more comfortable, I can put a question on the slide. It's a very important part of the discussion, so hope you guys will be chipping in. Okay, there are three kind of guiding questions, although our panelists, of course, can expand more on that. And by the wisdom given to us, the first question will be from silent down to Z. Second question will be Z up to silent. Then the third one, anybody can answer from whichever circle. So, yeah. So the first question is, dear friends, now we talk a lot about generations, but in all your years of ministry or where you were you aware of these generational differences? Even before this became more public in terms of our discussion and language. And if you were aware of different generations, did you take any concrete steps to address these differences in your ministry? So were you aware that there were these generational differences? And if you were there any concrete steps you did to address that in your ministries? Elder, understand?
Well, for starters, certainly we were aware, because I grew up in a Brethren assembly, and of course, one of the great kinds of divides would be the brethren, the men would be, as it were, privileged in a sense, and the women were meant to keep silent unless it was the ladies' meeting or some other functions like that. So there was that kind of a gap already, male and female, created he, them, as it were. But at the same time, of course, there were other differences, like differences about modes of worship. Because in the Brethren Assembly, the more traditional ones would sometimes not even have any musical instruments. And then gradually they were allowed. And then there were changes in that also. And so you see these differences in worship. As someone has said, worship can be a playground, holy ground, battleground. And so you have these kinds of differences even about worship. And in the brethren setting, again, you can see changes within assemblies and between assemblies in the scene in Singapore. So we were aware of this. And of course, each of the generations would have their preferences. They would like certain kinds of music, and sometimes the music would be equated to worship. And so you'll have these differences. And how did we try to manage? As has been mentioned, it'd be easy to just, in a multi-generational form, to have a traditional service, and then maybe a service for the younger people, and even a youth service. So that is what happened in Bethesda Frankel, for example, where we had the 8 a.m. service for the oldies, the older ones, who needed less sleep anyhow. And then you'll have the 10 o'clock service for couples and so on, younger ones and so on. And then a youth service, which was formerly part of the Sunday school system. So you have 3 services. But this would be some of the changes we saw within our assembly.
So I think maybe my focus would be education. So I'm actually a trained school teacher before I became a professor at Singapore Bible College. And I still remember one time when I was in the Bible College, I think I was only maybe about 35 or something at that point of time, young faculty. And I was just thinking, there's so many changes that are happening in the schools nowadays. There's so much innovation in terms of how people learn and how they are trying to design learning experiences for the students, etc. And then I said, what if we don't do any changes within the context of Bible college? Then people will be coming into an educational Jurassic Park era, and then it's like, whereas their experiences outside in schools is a lot more interactive and engaging, and then when they come into our theological schools, it's very kind of stuffy. And so I actually went to do my PhD in education. I switched from I was actually teaching Old Testament in the Bible College, and then I switched to education, go back to my roots. And over the years, when I've been serving churches, etc., I found that, hey, it's not unique to theological schools. Actually, the churches are also like that. So nothing has reformed in the classroom. Maybe the only innovation has happened in the, where the teachers are, because they got more technology to use and they are more empowered, but actually nothing has changed, in terms of how we are designing the learning experiences. So I think from an education point of view, I would observe that in the church. And I, already at a young age, I was very conscious of that change that is needed.
So your final word was that nothing has changed.
No, I think things have changed, but it's very, very. I think educational institutions and churches are slower to change, unless there's a push.
Yes, I'm aware of generational differences. So I've worked in the church in my previous life before I came into this role in the missions organization. So interestingly, when my first assignment in the church was to be the youth pastor. At that time, I just came back from the field, and we didn't have a youth service. I created the youth service, going against what you guys are trying to do here. But that came out from an observation that I felt like the young people's needs were not being met. Right, so maybe you can say very simplistic way of trying to solve an issue. Today the youth service still runs. My ex-colleagues are here, and they are also learning some of this from my mistakes, of course. And as I pondered about these questions, I came down to 3 S's. Right, the first one, I think, example would be expectation of sermons. I think that for my generation, as we sit and listen to a sermon, sometimes we get a message that it's almost like I could have gotten this if I just read the Bible at home. I didn't need to come to church. Yeah, I need to know so what and what is God actually saying to me. So I think the expectation of the sermon is one thing that it seems to be well accepted by maybe the older generation, but for my generation, we felt maybe a bit some discontentment. Like, so is that all there is to this? The second S, so that's sermon. The second one would be serving. So there is that fear of my generation that when you kena arrow to be in certain role, you sign on for life, right? So there is no end date and it goes on and on and on. So it, to a certain extent, it's seen as faithfulness and commitment, but we didn't really feel that way. Yeah, say, what if there's different things that come along, like you talk about the prata and soccer at 8 a.m., right? Yeah, that I need to have a different priority in life. So I think that led to the third S, which is selection of leaders, right? So when some of us get chosen to be leaders, then sometimes we are thrown into the deep end, and then we have to kind of figure things out. And sometimes the training are such that it's very biblical, it's really good, but the implications, how do I actually work that out in a church setting? That and are you really interested in what I'm going through as a young parent, things I'm struggling with taking care of my parents, things like that. So these are some of the examples.
Let me just say one thing, that we are not against age-specific ministries. And what you did actually probably have prevented some from leaving the church altogether. So we are not against that, but I'm just thinking, can we go beyond that to now integrate them again? So not that we are against age-specific, but
yeah. So I'll just share from my life experience, basically 2 areas. Actually, before this, I know something is changing, but just don't have the vocab or the language to this. So for example, one example is we run camps, right, for youth, and usually we will use songs to as a way to get them to respond to the word. Yeah. So there were times where there will come a period of time where you wonder, okay, what song should we choose? Because I grew up being mentored by a lot of boomers, and not sure, okay, maybe Gen X also. Yeah, so a lot of things I know was all hymns. So there come a time in the camp where I was thinking, wow, this hymn will be very good, but does the people know how to sing? If the people don't know how to sing, I cannot get them to respond, in using that song. So that's one. But at the time I didn't know about this. My language wasn't like intergeneration, but it's just something is odd here. The second life experience is, I know this is a bit sensitive, is evangelism in terms of target. Again, I was being brought up in a boomer, I've been mentored by boomers and Gen X, right? Targets are very important. And every time when we, being in a Youth for Christ event, in the environment, you want to have a certain target format. So I remember there was once during this particular evangelistic event, we set this target number, but we couldn't reach it. So the boomer will gather us and says, "Come, we need to really pray and ask God. We need to believe," and so on. So we really worked like mad, and that 2 days we really call people, go down to publicity, street, pub, and so on, and we managed to reach the target. But on hindsight, when we look back, right, I think that's the thing. I'm in the middle of like boomer and then of course Gen Z. So Gen Z will complain to me that, why do we have to work so hard? I mean, is it worth it? And yeah, I know the number is important. So I hear both sides. I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to? So if I side here, I lose them. If I side here, they scold me. So yeah. So again, I don't have the language that is intergenerational. I just know that I am sandwiched in between. While I believe the essence of targets, but at the same time, I was wondering, is that all that we do for evangelism? Yeah. So that's for me.
Thank you. Thelma?
Okay. Yeah. So generational differences. I think one of the things that made me aware of something was wrong was when people started leaving church, and I think that was like emotionally that meant a lot, and it started to like bring up a lot of questions in myself, and I think in a lot of my peers. So I think one of the things that I experienced quite a bit when I was serving in VCF is a lot of questions about church and about like, is it okay to change church, and what should a church look like? A lot of things like that. And actually, it became such a phenomenon where almost every camp group that I was in, and we had like 2 camps a year, maybe sometimes more, I would be talking to someone who is really struggling with church and struggling with like maybe serving too much and burning out, or even things like I'm not sure whether my church is feeding me enough. I'm not sure if I'm growing. Yeah, so there were a lot of these issues that were coming up, and I think there was the group that was like more vocal about it. Then there was the other group that would just leave. Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that I think is a huge generation difference is like how easily we identify as Christians. Like I think that for people who are Gen Z, we're very plugged into social circles where Christians have a stereotype, you know, or like they have, or they are trending on social media in ways that are like not actually that great for us. Like it's funny, you know, like the youth pastor TikToks that are like making fun of like the way that youth pastors talks, you know that kind of thing. It's like funny for us, but at the same time, it paints like an image of being a Christian that makes it hard for us, or like raises the cost of a young person to identify as a Christian. So when scandals come out in the news and stuff, then our friends are like, "Hey, you Christian, right?" It's like a bit harder to openly be like, yeah, I am. Yeah, so I think these are things that people who are like my age, I think, are dealing with, and these are generational differences that I find, are more prevalent.
Thank you.
I'm just thinking that how many of us boomers would understand what you just said?
Oh, oh dear.
How much pressure they are under in the global, in the internet world. They cannot whack, and the church don't know how to help them.
Thank you. Just wanted to check, does any of the panelists have any response to something which another panelist said that you, or trigger some thoughts that you want to say something? Tell me later, you tell me the TikTok, okay?
Okay, later I show you.
Anyone?
I think the whole question of sexuality, is a big question which I'm very mindful that my generation doesn't really try to ask too many difficult questions about, or tries to just sweep it under the carpet. I mean, there is that felt effect, but the answers that we don't really try to work through the answers that much. Whereas, because it's not something that really affects us that we need to sort out, because if we don't, we will die, or it will cost us something. But I think we often don't sympathize with your generation, for which it is these are your friends, and it's like every day it's in your face. Whereas it's not in our face, unless maybe your children, or it's really very close to home. So. I think it's important for us to highlight that disconnect. Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments, or building off Brother Calvin's thought about the sexuality? Do you also feel that this is something that is very different across the generation? No? Okay, if not, then maybe we can move on to the second question. Okay, yeah. So I guess the second question is, now that we kind of surface some of the differences between the generations, do you all feel that actually these differences are beneficial or detrimental to the church, in the general sense, and why do you feel that way? So I'm gonna, so this question is starting from the youngest to the oldest. So Thelma, you get to go first.
I think when I looked at this question, it's like a essay question, right? So I was thinking, beneficial, detrimental, maybe not the best frame to use. I think like in terms of a helpful frame, church communities are constantly changing in response to like different and very unique time, culture and place lah. Yeah, so I think that if we think about what we had in the past and how things have changed, I don't know whether I can put like the value judgment on it that it is necessarily beneficial or like detrimental. But I can tell you some of the things that have changed. I think in terms of like my generation, I think some of the things that we can really learn from the past is to not jump straight into feeling like we know it. And I think for my generation, where information is so accessible, there's a huge difference between information and experience. So sometimes when we see like someone ranting about, oh, this church is so culty, then we feel like we know it already, Or like if someone is ranting about or like someone is telling us or educating us, or we're reading an article about theology, then we feel like we kind of know it. And so we kind of just like, okay, that's it. And maybe that's all there is to know, but it's sort of an illusion at the same time. Because what you know is not the same as a lived experience. And okay, I can give an example of myself. I think for a very long time, I felt like quite indignant about like church, and I really struggled with church for a very long time, and I wanted to leave. And because I felt like I knew what a church should be, and there were a lot of imperfections. I mean, every church is imperfect, but I felt like at that point of time, I didn't know what to do with the imperfections, and no one was telling me how to deal with the gray. Yeah, so the moment that I came into VCF, I was the freshie who was having a lot of trouble with church, and I was telling all my friends about it. But it was only through a very long time, like many months. It was only when someone asked me whether I ever tried to love the church that I realized that, okay, like actually I have a lot of problems, and I knew a lot of how the church should be, but I forgot that there's a lived experience also to bridging differences or to trying to make things work. Yeah, so I think, these differences, I think for Gen Zs, I wanted to say something about like how Gen Zs, we are young and we are growing. Yeah, so I think for the many stereotypes that Gen Zs have as like being the woke generation or the lonely generation, all these things, right? I feel like they are also changing labels. Like, it's not something that like we should be fully known for. Yeah, but I think that Gen Zs also bring a lot of things to the table, to the church, such as empathy. And I think Gen Zs are a lot more in touch with like mental health issues and a lot more sensitive to the gray. Yeah, and these are things that I feel like when I hear young people talk about their friends or the things that they themselves are going through, it's very different from the way that like older people talk about things. You know, like for example, people would like from the older generation will be like, yeah, face your troubles, you know. But then people from Gen Z will really empathize, like, what is it that you're really feeling? Yeah, and really dig into maybe why past hurts and yeah. Okay, yeah. So I think for me, that's all.
Thank you. Yeah, see these Gen Zs, right, ask question, they want to change and rephrase the question. No, so
Yeah. Yeah, why must we accept this framing? So let me say that old folks were so busy surviving, they suppressed their feelings. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but that's why. And you all have more empathy because feelings feature more in your world. So we can learn from each other. Thank you for sharing.
thank you. Reggie?
Okay. I also have a problem with beneficial. What's your beneficial and detrimental? But I won't change. I will embrace both. Yeah. So I'm millennial, right? So I embrace both. All right. Okay. Anyway, so I think for me, it's both are possible. From my life experience as I look at it, I really think that it's really based on what disposition you take when you enter into these conversations. So one of the things that I learned from my marriage about conflict is sometimes a couple will there's only two sides. Whether when you enter into a conflict, you want to prove who is right, who is wrong, or you want to go into a conflict wanting to let's get it right together. So one focuses on I'm right, you're wrong. One focuses on relationships. So I find that often the time when intergeneration conflicts happens, naturally very conveniently, maybe because of time, because of energy, naturally went into who is right, who is wrong. Yeah, and I think as I also notice also that we don't usually, or I see people don't usually pick the part about why don't let's get it right together. What should be, what should be the, we consider about each other's well-being and so on. And I think when your disposition is about getting it right together, then that will also then lead to the types and the kind of conversation that you will have. Yeah, and I think when the kind of conversation happens, then I think it will shape the culture. So culture to me is a collection of conversations. Yeah, so what kind of conversations you have will shape the culture as well. So I think for me, my personal challenge for this is that it's very high cost on a personal level to hold that space for that conversation. Very high cost, very energy draining. Sometimes you really have to learn to be self-control. Sometimes you have learn to be patient. Sometimes you have learned to be extend kindness and generosity, knowing that you might not be appreciated. But yeah, so, but I think my hope is that, I mean, one of the things that I feel, I also went through a bit of what she went through about church. And I think one of the things that the Lord spoke to me about was that no matter how difficult the church is, the hope is that Jesus is the head of the body of Christ. He definitely is doing something to make us ready for His coming. Yeah, and yeah, so I think that's for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, it's the same, it's both. So it's beneficial and it's also detrimental. It's beneficial in the sense that it just surfaces all the issues, right? And we know that we can't just go on as with business as usual. So it forces us to, we have to come around to either talk or to solve the issue. So I think it's a good thing, it's beneficial, as what my younger friends have mentioned earlier. But I think where it becomes a bit tricky is because these are relational. This is a relational kind of situation, and sometimes we may use the framework of like troubleshooting. Maybe an engineering mind. Okay, if this is the problem, so we just troubleshoot. You do this, then everything will be okay. But so we use different models and different engineering perspective of trying to resolve relational issues, but then we realize that it actually cannot. Then we get frustrated. How come these things are not working? So it becomes detrimental when we maybe use the wrong models, we use the wrong kind of perspective to try and resolve these things. Another perspective is, as a church, especially those of us who come from a church where we have more people who are slightly older aging and we are losing the young people, right? They don't like to go to church and things like that. So sometimes we feel that pressure as church leaders we need to focus on the next generation. And in doing that, in emphasizing that, sometimes we kind of neglect either subtly or explicitly the older people and their needs. And then that's also not right. Yeah, as much as we think about the future of the church. So how then do we manage this tension? And if we try and use an engineering approach, it's not going to work. But how do we have that kind of relational approach of having conversations, of living things like, okay, today we talk until very, very hot already. Maybe let's take a break and come back and continue. Do we have people who are able to facilitate this kind of conversations and to trust that, as what you were saying, to trust that this is the Church of Jesus and He's going to come in and help us to make sense of this thing. So that's both the beneficial and the detrimental aspects. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just keep it as beneficial for our generation, the boomer generation, and maybe let me just set it in the context of what I feel my generation is very good at. We are very good at. We have a lot of power. We have a lot of spiritual authority, and we are very good at playing that card, right? And in that sense, we sometimes don't see our excesses and our, things could be, for example, our generational racism. That nobody ever talks about it, but my generation is actually super racist, right? Is that true, right? You're not supposed to say yes, but it's true. And also spiritual authority, and very often I see that as holding up a mirror to us to see some of these things that we are not very perfect in, And I often, in school, I often talk about, how sometimes in the church there's a space for us to land in for many spots for us, to land in the same, a space with boundaries. But sometimes we define what is correct by a spot rather than a space, right? And it's my way or the highway, because my way is Yahweh, right? Amen? Right? So, and only people our generation can say that. You see, because who are you, a young person? But for us, we are saying that all the time, and we're beating the drum and we are blowing that trumpet. But, to eventually have a generation that is maybe more compassionate and more tuned into justice, to hold up the mirror to us and say, hey, you're not as perfect as you say you are, right? And I think that's really, really important, and I, in a sense, celebrate your generation for your global mindedness, your openness, because we are very parochial, right? We are very good at that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I might have given a perhaps rather negative view at the start about worship differences, music worship differences, but I must say that generally these have been growing pains. It has been providing lessons for us to learn from one another, and in the brethren context, it depends really on the leadership and how representative they are, and of course it varies from church to church. But I would say that generally, this has been a time of growing pains. We have come to terms with each other. And of course, in the process, don't forget, there are some people who are offended and they might leave the church to go to other churches, or worse still, maybe decide that they've had enough of the church. But nonetheless, I think that these are important times when we learn how to live with each other. And I think that also, when we think in terms of male and female in certain churches, there's been a development clearly in coming to terms with the fact that men and women are having complementary roles, and not just complementary roles, but important roles in their own ways. And they should learn to, and I see in many brethren assemblies also, how the women have come into their own. Not just a ladies' meeting as such, but now playing a more important role in not just missions or certain areas, but in other ways as well. So I think that when you talk about beneficial or detrimental, of course both. You have see the results, and not just at the church level, but at individual levels. You have certain, beneficial as well as detrimental results. But I think that the important thing is to really learn Christ, as it were. Yeah. And I think this has been the target. As long as the foundations are strong and it's Christ-centric, firm foundations, I think we can grow into the likeness of Christ, despite, and of course, because of these growing pains. So this is what I would say has been taking place. So don't go with the idea that it's been a kind of a negative thing all along. But we've come to terms with each other in the process.
That's such a hopeful statement. I think it keeps going back to male and female because that has been an existential issue for brethren churches. But what I hear is that we move towards complementation, and that's true for generations as well. Instead of being competitive, how can we complement? So I want to hear you, because your existential issue for brethren churches is the male, female. Then you move towards complementation rather than competition. Thank you, sir. I think I've been blown away by tonight. This is a PhD thesis on the generations from this group up here.
You say you want to do altar call, right?
Yeah, altar call. All those who want now to be balanced, come forward now. The altar rail here. Sorry. Yeah. The last of the three questions, of course, there are many questions, and I hope you all will surface some during the question time. Is as it was said, Reggie has said, wow, Chuan, terrible. To hold this space where you try to build bridges between the two sides is so exhausting and often without any immediate reward. So is it necessary to do all this at all? I mean, can we just continue our silo kind of approach? Why must we do all this hard work to bridge the generations? And if it is what we need to do, where do we start? What's the first step? So now anyone can answer. why bother with this? And if indeed we want to move in this direction, where we start?
And just to also add on, there were some workshops that we did where at the end of the workshop, the leaders of the church would say, wow, so difficult. Then why don't we just have all mono-generational churches? Or, when the young come of age, then we just allow them to go outside of their own church. Then we all just be happy, So the same generation, more or less think the same. Yeah, so is it actually necessary for us to bridge these differences?
Let's have church A only for one age, church B, then no need to fight. So what do you think, guys? Is this is really worth the hard work of this so-called intergen thing? There's so much emotions needed. Anyone? share one.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's important. Maybe. Okay. I think just now when I was talking about like information versus experience, the thing that we have as a generation, we have a lot of information, but we don't necessarily have the experience. And I think one of the things that maybe my generation will struggle with the most, right, is community. Whereas I feel like other generations are like a lot more akin to interdependence rather than independence. So I think one of the things that I learned the best from my church in intergenerationally is through mixed cell groups. Mixed generation cell groups. Yeah, and I'll say that it doesn't go all the way to the silent generation and the baby boomers, but we do have interaction every year. We change our cell groups, and I'm learning from young parents, for example, about what it means to bring up a family and to be family-minded. And I think that community aspect, or that just thinking about somebody else, is something that is so it's just so natural to them as parents, that a young person like me is just not necessarily it doesn't scare us off, but it just intrigues us. Yeah, so I think mixed age cell groups are really important. But I think on the flip side, I also have cell groups, or I've been part of groups with even younger Gen Z. So I would classify myself as a senior Gen Z, because I'm more on like that end. Yeah, so like the real Gen Zs, right? The real Gen Zs, the one who like, they're like that, that kind of. Yeah, the real Gen Zs, they teach me a lot also. Yeah, and there's so much that I learned from them that, but it is also something that I have to train myself to be able to be teachable. So I think one of the things that you were talking about was about intergeneration versus like, what was the other, multi-generation, and like there was a classification, right? And how it's about being transformed by the encounter. When I'm talking to a 12-year-old about like Taylor Swift, for example, they have like different opinions, or they have different opinions of the world, but we can vibe on the same level. And I think when you talk to a 12-year-old, or when you talk to a tween, can you look at them and think of them as like brother and sister, and also think of their issues as something that is legit? So like a kid going through PSLE, can I look at their stresses and take it seriously? I think that's something that I had to train myself also to learn. But I see it from my older self, where fathers and mothers take me seriously in my unemployment era right now, for example. Yeah, so I think these things, it's amazing to see when older people do that for me, I can pass it on as well. Yeah, so I think mixed age cell groups really work. And not just doing Bible study, but just playing also. Yeah, so that's what I had.
You mean you all don't do Bible study in your cell group, right?
No. Yeah, but playing is quite important. I think like just learning how to take church less seriously sometimes is quite important. not to okay, I don't want to get cancelled. Yeah, sorry.
No, but thank you for your candidness. Yeah. Anyone else has a response? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important. Even though I just now mentioned that it's a lot of hard work. Yes, it is. There's a lot of. If you want to do this work, it really requires you to be ready to put yourself out there, and I guess learning to sacrifice to hold that space. So I find that one of the things that the Lord actually motivate me is basically, I think 2 verses. One is in Acts, where the Lord add to their number daily, right? But before that, what happens was that you see how the the members in the church were sharing with each other, devote to the apostle teaching and so on. And then, of course, there's another verse in John that says that by this will all men know that you're my disciple if you love one another. Even though originally I thought this intergen issue was just church, but I realized that actually world at large is also facing that, right? I mean, CNA has some documentary about how there's workplace intergen issues and so on. I felt that it is so important for us as body of Christ to show how actually intergen can actually come together and live together and have relationship together because because we have the love of Christ. I tell you, really, when you do this, right, without the love of Christ, without always connecting with God's love, right, you don't have the capacity to do that. Yeah, so I think for me, on a personal note, it's a very good opportunity for me to express the love of Christ in my life, through my life, and to other people. And the other thing that I also learned about from this is, just hinging on Willie, right? Correct. Our Pastor Willie. Okay. See, as a millennial, I have to understand, empathize, and then respect, right? So, so that is the
Sandwich.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I think just hinging on that, I hope one of the things, if I could bring an insight, is that intergen work is not a structured thing. It's not a planned thing. It's not a strategy plan. I think one of the things as I work with older ones, often the time the very first thing is they go into solutioning, strategy, plans. No, none of this. We need to learn to have conversations because intergen is a relationship thing. So relationship should be solved by conversations. So I think that's what I did with my team in YFC, where I think there are some within the millennial and Gen Z, there are also some level of tension. So I'm thankful for a brother or a friend of mine who is an organization development coach. So he came and actually created for us this setting where we could honestly share with each other how are we and how we could better work together and what are some of the pain points that we have caused each other. So for example, one of the things that surfaced out as a team is that we do not know how to make requests. Because before that, the boomer generation that led this group, whenever we make requests, it was being shut down. I mean, intentionally, unintentionally, that's another question. But I think because of that creates a culture where we do not dare to make requests. So among each other, when we are suffering, we don't know how to make requests to each other. So therefore, I think this is the work that as a team we need to work. We need to know how to make requests, and request means it's a yes and a no. So you must accept that there's a no. Yeah. So I think that is something that we have to learn. Just a quick one. Also, the second way to apply, which I want to publicize for you all, which is, I mean, Wei Hao actually came to Youth for Christ to actually share with us about Gen Z. And I think with that data that the volunteers, leaders have learned, so again, we took the data. The common thing is you take the data, you go straight to solutioning, which I really highly encourage, don't do that, because you are cutting short a lot of things. So one of the things I learned is that, so from that Gen Z report, we then have conversations. Again, you need to facilitate conversation. And to facilitate conversation, the good thing is everyone has ownership, and you get to see different perspective of things. Yeah. But I think the hard work is the person who is holding that conversation, facilitating. How do you conclude? How do you come to a point where, okay, what should we do to move forward? Yeah. So I feel that the solutioning should come later. Don't be so quick to go into solutioning. Yeah. So that's my take.
Thank you.
Yes, I mentioned just now the importance of firm foundations. Now, the other thing I want to stress is a friendly family. The church is a family. I always remember a seminar which Dr. John Stott gave in Grace Chapel, Lexington, years ago. The theme was Healthy Families, Healthy Church. So I think that really this is really key. Don't forget that the church is a family, and it should be a friendly family. Now, in our church, we were started by a number of families, actually. maybe about 25 of us started Bethesda Frankel. And then there were certain core families, and they really set the tone to the importance of families and churches. So more and more families came in. And of course, sometimes people came detached because their parents or their siblings and so on were not Christians, or their children are not Christians. So we had to give them a sense of family, really. And I can't emphasize enough the need for that. And to take a word which Suin loves very much, is a matter of friendship, really. It's how to make these families friends, because not all people in the same family are friends, as you know. Sometimes in a family there are lots of tensions and problems and so on, sibling rivalry. But really we're talking about healthy families, and the church must be a healthy family. So this is why I stress when you talk about things you've tried. In our church, we have cell groups, and really that's been one of the key to the church being healthy and growing. So I would just like to emphasize that again. And also, friends in transition suggestion in the book. That's one way also to enlarge the sense of family among your friends.
Thank you.
I'm only taking this mic because I don't want to be the last. But definitely the whole question of, whether your church is a warm church, I think there's some magnet in that. I looked at that question and I said, so I'm going to reframe. Oops, sorry. No, actually, it's like, of course it's necessary to bridge the differences. So, I actually penned down some words and I wrote down, I think the more important question is, how do you do it organically so that it becomes natural, valued, and sacred or guarded? Let me just say that again, okay? So more importantly, I think the more important question for us to ask is, how do we do it organically so that it becomes natural, valued, and sacred stroke guarded? And then I think it's also important for us to create spaces and occasions in the rhythms of church life where these interactions actually do happen. So in terms of real examples, because it also asks for examples, I used to be the worship chair in my church. And being worship chair, I think the music band is a very nice place where multi-generations can meet to serve the Lord together. Now, the other observation I do want to make is that if you put a millennial together with a Gen Z, together with a silent Gen musician, okay, my point is it doesn't automatically happen. Okay, it doesn't automatically happen. So I think, to me, it is actually just disastrous. But I think with a bit of coaching, with a bit of practice, and with a bit of ground rules working at it together, actually it can come out quite okay. I'm thinking special interest groups in the church which focus on things that matter to church life and to the Lord. I think that's a very good place to start. Just to let you into a little secret, this afternoon I spent time with these young people over here, and we were building virtual worlds because I teach a course on which involves building of VR and AR and stuff like that. And it was very interesting because the place that we were at, Digital Ministries, that 360, right, is actually run by a silent Gen person. He kind of oversees the thing. And the space today was very interesting because we had a very young person. He's not even listed here. He's an alpha, right? He was an alpha. We had the Z, we had X, we had millennial, we had boomer, and we were all working on a similar cause. And, I think, Merv, you have a video of that happening. And I looked at the video and I said, there's something that's so aligned with tonight's conversation and the direction that we want to. So my point is that, it needs some, a cause that all of us believe in. All the generations believe in that cause, and we are willing to work together. Okay, I'm going inside, and I know nuts about coding, and these guys are all, coding experts, and I'm learning from them. Another guy is creating the space so that, the rest of them can, this is their playground. But, you know, the playground is expensive to maintain, right? So somebody is providing it, and it's generally people with money. And what generation is that? You go answer the question, right? But you know what? I mean, we see multiple resources in action serving the same cause. And I think that that was, to me, a very beautiful picture. So thank you, guys. I learned so much today.
Hey, this is opinion. Was it really that good? Okay, I watched it a little. I'm also curious, anybody here know what is VR? And does everybody here know who is John Stott? So it will be another conversation. So we should have that conversation.
Yeah, so church has been going through a bit of leadership challenges the past few years. And I think that became the impetus for us to seriously consider this intergenerational thing. So, I mean, we heard of that Chinese term, 危机, right? So because when you have a crisis, you have an opportunity. So God has been really good. It's been a painful journey for us. It's been a painful journey for us, but still we see the redemptive work of God through this time. So because of this, my senior pastor became very interested in this intergen thing, right? And we have the pastor who's in charge of this intergen thing, of the next gen, who's been given assigned this role of looking into the intergen thing. So she gathered her team of children and youth people, and then they begin to do a study into this whole area. And we got connected with Graceworks, and they've been coming to do sermons for us, do workshops for us. And tomorrow is our inaugural intergen service. Yeah, so I was just thinking about it, so interesting. Today, tomorrow is going to happen. We have been telling the church the past few Sundays that it may be very chaotic, right? But please still come to church. Don't just stay at home and watch or join another church, right? Please come to church, because this is an expression of what we feel with what we have gone through. This is where the Lord wants us to be at. So we kind of take three words. We want to be able to bond, we want to feel belong, and we want to learn to bless one another. And the end of all this is not just for us to be one big happy family, as what you have alluded to, or not alluded to, said very clearly that unless we can be a healthy family, how then can we be a witness to the world? Why would they look at us like we are so messed up, right? It's like, wow, their families are doing better than us and we are so dysfunctional. This will actually be an evangelism tool that can draw people in. So we're on a journey. We are not sure what's going to happen, and we've been the pastor in charge of this project has requested for this service to happen once every month. Wow, so very strong, because I'm also involved. Yeah, so those of us who are involved with this service, you literally have to do the service in a different way. So once a week, once every Sunday, in every given month, we have to run it differently. But we are glad that the Lord has given us this opportunity and we can really learn together. Yep. So please pray for us. Yeah, that hopefully April people will still come back for the intergen service.
Thank you so much for your response.
Just two things is that, maybe one thing, I can't remember what I thought. I'm old already. I was thinking that beyond theology and sociology is spiritual maturity. Like humility, patience, it's a fruit of the Spirit. We may know all the theory of how we're supposed to connect, but organically, it presupposes it comes from the heart. And so I heard from all of these people here, in some sense, they're not representative of their generation in the sense that they are very mature people, mature in Christ, mature Gen Z, millennial. And so as we seek to understand how the different generations connect, there's, of course, the call for us to be filled with the Spirit and grow in Christ-likeness. That would be the basis for us to even work at all these things which are clearly very difficult. So it's not just a matter of knowing technique or theology or even sociology, but that the Christ fills our heart.
Thank you. So I'm conscious of time, and I do want to give some time for Q&A for the audience to also interact with our panelists. So I'm going to give precedence for those who are willing to raise their hands, and we have a mic passed to you and you ask a question before we go to the Slido questions, okay? So can I just ask, does anyone want to ask a question?
Anyone?
You can ask any of the panelists or
Hello, do I need to stand up? No.
Yeah, can I still stand up and maybe introduce yourself?
Don't need lah, walao eh. Hi, I'm Matthew. Yeah, so I have a question. Actually, I also asked the same question as Slido, so you can just throw that question away. But my question is perhaps a bit spicy for tonight. Do you think that in the process of a church becoming more intergen, that they might lose something that is desirable about its current pattern of operation? Like an example would be maybe Thelma talked about mixed CGs. Would perhaps mixed CGs lose something that a non-mixed CG would be better at? So yeah, that's my question.
Thank you. Yeah, anyone like to respond?
Okay, I can answer the mixed CG one. So the way it works in my church, right, is I think there is a natural inclination for people of the same age to just get along. Yeah, and okay, maybe not natural for some because maybe your churches are like bigger than mine. Mine is like 300 and we all grew up together. But I think that it is easier for me and someone of the same-ish age to just get along. And I think it's way harder for me to get along with someone from a different generation. So I think the mixed CGs, there is like that cost and benefit. Yeah, but I think what we do, my batch mates, we hang out outside of our CG time. Yeah, and we do this like monthly. And I think it was an organic thing also because we all wanted to celebrate, like say one person's birthday, you know, and then yeah, things happen and it becomes like a thing over time. Yeah, but it does take effort to build friendships. Yeah, but I think mixed CGs are really, really special.
I don't believe that everything should be mixed. That's why just now I mentioned that it's important for us to build it into the rhythms of the church life, but not as a compulsory. We have to do it every week because you're right. You will lose a certain kind of flavor. Certain kinds of people, when we talk amongst ourselves, your generation will never understand us, right? Or if we gather together as programmers or theologians or medical doctors, you want to hang out with your own because, you want to talk shop and, that kind of thing. So it's important for you to have a combination rather than just one, one layer kind of thing, monolithic.
Yeah. So we always said that we are not against age-specific or community-specific ministries, but there will be these other spaces as well, not to replace. Not, hey, your meeting got no Gen X, cannot meet. I see only 2 millennial and 1 Gen Z, cannot. No lah, how can you make, people don't react this way. But let me make another point, which Weihao normally makes, is that one understanding is that some number of churches now are all mono-generational. So, and they do very well. I cannot mention names here, but some church will only with this generation, and they're doing very well because they attract people of the same generation. But Weihao has said, and my colleague, that what happens when they grow old and their children come up? And if their children have been shaped by different formative forces, but this generation, this initial group, have never had the hard work of connecting to other generation, all same generation one. But then when you grow old, we all grow old. Then the youngsters come up, maybe their formative is different. But then, now suddenly got tension again because all the young people go to another church. So I think we still, although it is tough, and we admit that all along, it's not a matter of shutting down same type of people, that's not the point, but working at learning, I think maybe it's a Christian thing, how to love people different from us, is something that will make us Christian, so that when we relate to people different from us, outside, younger, older, it's a way of showing the reality of God.
I feel like what is important is in the church has different seasons that we go through. So, for example, my church, doing this intergen thing and being full on about it is important. We know this, what the Lord is telling us, so we would sort of put aside that we will lose some of the things, as you said, but we know this is what the Lord wants us to do. And our leaders are ready for it. We feel this is the right timing. So I think there's many different factors that's involved, and we can't really take one plan and then just put it in, right? So some of our leaders, if they're not ready, then we probably can't do that. And maybe it's just starting by asking them to eat prata at 8 o'clock in the morning, and just form a fellowship and just having very simple, organic way of connecting. And maybe from there, after 2-3 years, then they are open. Hey, why don't we do an intergen kind of thing? And these things cannot be rushed. It cannot be structured, and there needs to be that sensing of what God is saying to the church in this time. If not, we all walk away and then we must intergen the church. Then that's not being very sensitive. And maybe they talk about conversations. Maybe some of the silent generation, they may not be comfortable to do conversations. We may be killing them to make them talk. Then that's not being loving as well. So I think we need that sense of the Lord, and also that sense of, is this the right timing for things?
I have a very difficult question, and it's quite a painful question. On the platform, I can see Professor Ernest Chu. You see, I'm a baby boomer, or rather a post-war baby. So that caused you to know my age. During those times, people like Dr. Benjamin Chu, you know, he's such a spiritual giant. And he go down to even minister and encourage younger men like me. Those days, he was already 50-something. I was only 20-something. You know, he created rapport and a relationship with us, and he encouraged us so much. Even the Valley Road, Glad Tidings, William Lee, they were all older than me. Singapore Bible College, Bolson, they came to me and talked to me and helped me in all that I need to know. Now, my difficult thing is that now I'm already 70. I dare not encourage, and I'm fearful of encouraging the younger ones, 70 years old, 50 years old, 40 years old. I tell you, that has become my own personal problem. Please help.
You haven't told us why. Why are you scared?
Yeah, that's where, you know, your question is very direct. Why am I scared? Because they are so knowledgeable. They turn on the computer, they get almost everything that they want. Like organizational, know-how, even, switch on UI Packer. UI Packer is there. I mean, John Piper is there in front of them. So if I want to tell them a little bit more, maybe they know better.
From the committee, I mean, sometimes we older people, we grapple with the reality that our younger friends actually know a lot, which you have said. And so, do I actually have anything to value add to them, and they already know so much more than me? So the fear of addressing younger people. So help.
Oh, okay. Hi, Uncle. I think that's something that I realized about my generation, that we have so much information, we feel like we already know. But then, that is a real thing, like the lived experience is something that we can learn so much from you from. And I think in terms of encouraging, maybe it's not like in terms of explaining how things work in the world, because we feel like we already know, but you can tell us what it was like for you. I feel like if you tell a story, we love stories. Like, we love hearing like what was tough, how you went through it. I think there's so much that you have been through that we, like, as much as we can read online, it will be so different from hearing it from you yourself. So I would love to be encouraged by older people as well. And I think that it's really that from people who are more senior in years, really, when they encourage me, when they tell me that they can see something in me, or like when they tell me about their own experience and it relates to me, I think that is what church is really for also. That I will not encounter this kind of desire to even encourage in the workplace or in schools in the same way. Yeah, but I think church is a place where every one of our different generations experiences God and experiences faith in our own unique ways. And when we can learn from one another, I feel like that is what church will look more beautiful through. Yeah.
Hi, uncle. I don't know what to say. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think what comes to my mind is I think maybe not just you to us younger. I think personally on my note, me to the older ones also, right? So so sometimes I remember there was this meeting where I invited an older person to, and I think she's in her 60s, 70s, to be part of this conversation. Naturally, I feel very impatient because okay, first of all, she has a lot of questions to ask, and things are not moving forward. Yeah, so I realized for me, one of my things I have to catch myself is I actually project my own view of who this generation is on that person. In the same way, when I see all of you here, I have a certain projection. So if I have a certain projection of you here, it will make me shrink back. But I have learned to choose that to see all of us here, or even that lady, that old lady, that to be also a fellow sister in Christ. How then should I learn to love her as a sister in Christ and relate with her as a sister in Christ? But of course, at the same time, knowing that she's older than me, how do I relate with her as an older sister in Christ? Yeah, so I guess sometimes our perception or what we project on other people affects how we relate with that person. Yeah, so my suggestion is to be aware of your own projection on other people. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick note that it's not just, I guess, the older ones who may be scared of speaking to the younger ones. A lot of times the younger ones are also very scared of speaking to the older ones. And I think the unfortunate thing is a lot of times in our churches, the only time when an older person speaks to a younger person is usually to scold the younger person, right? or is to start the conversation, in my time, you know what we did. So I guess there's always fear in both ways. And I think it boils down to the way that we are used to communicating with each other. So because in my first job, I used to be a social worker, right? And a lot of my work was with the elderly. So I think I was very privileged to, at a very young age, to be able to spend a lot of time with the old. And I realized that one thing that's very different between the young and the old is, as young people, when I was still young, now not very young, but as young people, we like to speak about the future because the future is most of our lives lie ahead of us, right? But for the older generation, they like to speak about the past because the bulk of their life is behind them already. But as well as the older person, sometimes you may want to just tell the younger person, I just do this and you'll be okay one. Or as a younger person, why you tell me this story 50 times already? Can you say something else or not here? And so I guess it's just because we are coming from very different angles, and that causes some tension and some differences in communication. I think a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding may help to bridge that fear. But of course, that will take some courage to kind of make the first step into bridging that gap. I'm sorry, yeah. Any other panelists would like to respond? Maybe one more question? Yes.
Okay, this one is more towards the Gen Y, Gen Z. So just to throw out the question, especially in church circles, do you find it is true that also cultural barriers, not just age, can also come into play, especially when trying to relate to Gen Y, Gen Z? Especially for us coming from Chinese ed background where our England is not so good. Whereby not just in terms of theology, but even the vernacular lingo of the day, we are also not as how to say, well versed. For instance, let's say your usual jargon like BLM, because for Gen Z it is the Black Lives Matter. For us from the Chinese background, is bo lui mai gong.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the question is really how then is this thing able to be bridged, especially when relating to Gen Y, Gen Z?
Any thoughts?
Let me think.
Wait, so your question is about language, right? Or other cultural barriers relating to Gen Zs? Okay, I guess like Singapore Gen Zs, right? We all speak English, right? So there was an issue in my church because my church was mostly Chinese or like is bilingual, but we used to have more Chinese and now a bit less. Yeah, I think my pastors made the switch, and I remember me and my brother, who's older than me, we were part of this batch who like fought for English. Like we fought for like English speakers, for camps and things like that. We used to have Chinese speakers, but then I think that we can still relate to Chinese speaking groups. Yeah, like we are still Chinese and we still understand, even though our Chinese is also very bad. But I think we sort of meet in the middle. So I feel like that shouldn't be a factor that scares off intergen efforts. Yeah. Other cultural barriers?
I think for me, I'm not so sure whether you can resolve or not. I think we are not here to resolve differences. I think for me, my take will be as you work through these differences, how might we find a way to love one another? Yeah.
Do any of the wiser panelists to say anything?
I suspect that this also has to do with the relationships between Chinese and English congregations in churches sometimes, because that is something which also needs to be bridged. They occupy the same buildings and they worship at different times, but how do we have communications between them, and not just that, sometimes with the other ethnicities in the church or the other church groups. And I think in Singapore, this is something we have to really face, not just the intergenerational divide, but sometimes inter-ethnic differences. So I think that this is something which we need to give some attention to as well. Communications between brothers and sisters, but from different ethnic groups. And remember this, as has been said, there's especially maybe the older generations, there's a lot of racism embedded in it sometimes. And I'm glad that perhaps the younger ones, there's less of this matter of, racist kinds of stereotypes and prejudices. So I'm glad to see this development, in fact. And I think that this goes towards really the idea of seeking God's kingdom and His justice, His righteousness first.
Thank you.
I just totally am so aligned with what Prof has just said. I said I was quite intentional using the term racism earlier on because it was really to extend the conversation beyond intergenerational, crossing the bridges across the generations within your own church alone. I mean, that is the nature of the project, no doubt. But then the reality is that other ethnicities, either in our churches or outside our churches, because, when you talk about missions, there's no running away from people with, other ethnicities around you or in different parts of the world. And the point is that they're all around you nowadays. And so how do we treat people in our homes who are of different ethnicities? Your domestic worker, the person downstairs who's, doing the work around how do you treat them? How do you see them? I think to the extent that you see them as real people and extend hospitality and real love will be the extent that you will be very, very good or bad in relating to the generations. In that sense, it's the same principles that are in operation, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, if not, then I think I'm conscious of time. I think we will have to close this part of the Q&A. So maybe could we just give a round of applause for our panelists? Yeah. And I guess if you have any other questions, maybe after this, you can go up to them personally. So I'm just going to get Suin, my esteemed older colleague and mentor, to present them with a gift for. Okay, so we're almost coming to the end of tonight, but just before we close, just give me a couple more minutes. So we're just going to close by kind of quickly telling you how, if you would like it, how we could possibly partner your church or your organization. Yeah, okay. So we've kind of come up with a 3-stage partnership that you can consider. So the first stage is really just about information, right? So it's for us to go in a 3-hour workshop, give you a snapshot of what we found in our studies, the different what the different generations are like, what are some areas of concern that we think churches should look at. But of course, the caveat, this is now actually a full course in BGST, which is 6 sessions of 3 hours. This is about a 3-hour workshop, so it's really just a snapshot. Second level, in terms of contextualization, is for us to run the quantitative survey that we ran as a randomized sampling for your particular church, so that you know for your church which are the archetypes of each generation that are more prevalent, which are the trends that are more prevalent in your church, so that you have a better idea of what you should be taking note of. And finally, the last stage is intervention. So because we believe that every church is different and every church is unique, we don't want to have a one-size-fits-all solution for everyone. So the last stage is for us to go in as almost as if it's like a consultant to understand what are some of the issues your church are facing, and to see if our data as well as our experience will be able to help you craft out something that is unique for your church. So this is again, if you're interested, you can contact us. And also just what's next, right? So now that the book is out, now that the survey is out, the next stage, the big thing that now we're trying to look at is how can we use the research data in a practical way, like in an easy way, because not everybody wants to attend a course, not everybody wants to read a book, even though the book got a lot of picture, got color, but also not I'm told by my friends that anything more than 10 pages, the Gen Z will just not look at it, right? So I don't know if that's true. But one thing we're trying to do, and we are partnering with a couple of churches and indigenous as well, is to do conversation cards, right? So these are easy questions that you can use that can be facilitated in intergen groups to talk through some of the issues that we have surfaced as important. But of course, this is just still a prototype. And if your church will be willing to partner with us to test some of these questions, because we don't know, right? I don't know if I ask these questions, how many people will die in this church? And if 10 people die, maybe I make it less sensitive. Or is it not sensitive enough? We don't know, right? So if your church would like to partner with us, please let us know. And also because of a connection with Dr. Kelvin, right, a group of SPC students is also trying to think through how we can gamify all the data that we have. Where can we bring different generations together and have fun? Okay, that's something that I really don't know whether it will work out. In my mind, I cannot imagine a silent Gen playing a board game with a Gen Z and having fun, but that's something which they are trying to help us to do. So again, we'll update you all if you are interested, and if your church is willing to help us to test some of these, to use it, then we'll be very, very grateful. Yeah, and so these are some of the developments. And so we'll come to a close. I'm going to invite Kok Hyang to come and close us in prayer, as well as to just close this meeting for us.
Thank you. Before I pray, I just want to say a word of appreciation to Wei Hao and Suin and the team at Graceworks. And maybe I don't claim to represent the church in Singapore, but I think many friends here really, and the churches that they have gone to present the seminars and engage many of us, I think this is a very important work that they have given as a gift to the church, to have a lot more conversations, It's not about finding the formula or the solution, but it's just creating the platform for conversations and to have fun and to play games, So let's thank the team at Graceworks for their hard work. I think it was birthed during the COVID, right? So, okay, would you join me in prayer to pray for this project? Father, we thank you for even just the conversations we heard tonight on the panel, and how we need to be sensitive, we need to learn from each other, and how we need to hear from each other. Father, what goes on this stage, the last 60 minutes, our real life challenges that we faced, whether in our churches, in our ministry, or even at home, in our families as well. As we raise our children, and now we have, across generations, living under the same roof. Father, I pray that would you use this project to spark off many, many conversations so that we can become a more loving community in the church and at home. I pray that, Lord, you use this data, seminar and conversations to really deepen our love for one another. Because this is what this project is about, loving as Christ has called us to love one another. And as we grow, as we mature, as our churches become more multi-generational, because of growth, of church growth, we have seen the weaknesses of that as well. And so help us even as we seek to become more loving towards one another from the different generations. And help us also to, that through this project, that we can appreciate and collaborate, across generations, so that the church become a loving community for all people, not just a particular group or particular generation. So would you bless this project, the hard work that has been put into it, both in the research and now in book form, and now trying to bring it so that more churches and more stakeholders can be aware of this wonderful resource that is available. So would you bless this project, bless Wei Hao and Suyin and the team at Graceworks in this season as you've called them to launch this project. So thank you again for this evening, and would you grant them manifold blessings, and that blessings can be shared with the rest of the body of Christ. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for spending your Saturday with us. Thank you.